lesson for chapter 2. It'll be 2.7. I can solve absolute value equations. So just to review, absolute value means distance from 0. So I'm going to write that down. Absolute value is the distance from 0. Okay, and then let's just review basic absolute values. So I'm going to do a few examples here. The absolute value of 5 is 5 because it's 5 units away from 0. The absolute value of -3 is 3 because it's 3 units away from 0. If I have the absolute value sign on the outside, we do the absolute value first. The absolute value of 5 is 5. The negative, or the opposite of that, is -5. Okay, let's look at something a little different. What if I say the absolute value of x equals 8? So whatever x is has to be 8 units from 0. There are two answers here because there are two numbers that are 8 units away from 0. 8 is 8 units away from 0. So is -8. So x could be either one, because if I plug either one in for x, the absolute value will be a +8. So for example, 5, if we say the absolute value of x equals 10, that means x is either a -10 or x is a +10, because either one has an absolute value of 10. Okay, the last example is the absolute value of x equals -4. We can never have a negative absolute value or a negative distance, so there's nothing I can plug in for x that will give me an absolute value of -4. Nothing can be -4 units away from 0, so this one is no solution. Okay, let's talk about how we're going to use this. So, we said for problems like the absolute value of x equals 5, we have two possible answers. We have x is 5, or we have x is -5. Most of these are going to have more steps than this. This one really didn't have any steps. We just had to be able to find the answer. So if I have an equation like absolute value of x plus 4 equals 5, I know everything inside of here can equal one of two things. It can either, x plus 4 can either equal 5, or x plus 4 can equal -5. I have to set up two separate equations here. All of this can either equal 5, or all of this can either equal -5. And then I'll solve each equation. So on this side I get x equals 1. If I solve this one, I get x equals -9. So my two answers for this equation are x equals 1 and x equals -9. We have two solutions. Either one, when I plug them in, 1 plus 4 is 5, -9 plus 4 is -5. The absolute value of -5 is +5. Let's do some with some more steps. So what example are we on? I think we're on 7. I haven't been numbering these very well. Let's do the absolute value of 2x minus 5 equals 9. I need to set up two equations because 2x minus 5 either equals 9 or 2x minus 5 equals -9. So everything inside here either equals 9 or it equals -9, so I have these two equations to solve. Add 5, so I have 2x equals 14, divide by 2, so x equals 7. On this side, I would add 5 to both sides, so I have 2x equals -4, divide by 2, so x equals -2. So my two solutions are x equals 7 or x equals -2. For number 8, example 8, let's do the absolute value of 2x plus 3x minus 6x equals 7. So the first thing I need to do is set up my two equations. Either everything inside equals 7, or my other equation would be everything inside the absolute value signs equals -7. all I know is that it's 7 units away from 0, so it equals one of those two things. Make sure you can see all of this. Okay, then I solve these equations. I need to simplify and combine like terms over here. 2x plus 3x is 5x. 5x plus negative 6x is negative 1x. Divide by negative 1. So x equals negative 7. If I solve this equation, 2x plus 3x equals 5x. 5 plus negative 6x is negative 1x. Divide by negative 1 to get x by itself, so x equals positive 7. So in this equation, x either equals negative 7 or x equals positive 7. Okay, so I didn't mention this earlier, but we're just going to use our regular solving equation rules once we set up our two equations. Before you can set up your two equations, you have to have the absolute value part by itself. So I'm going to do just one more example. We'll do example 9. You have to have the absolute value part by itself before you can set up your two equations. So I'm going to do 2 times the absolute value of x minus 8 plus 9 equals 15. We need to have this by itself before we can do our two equations, so I'm going to get rid of everything else. So to get rid of this plus 9, I'm going to subtract 9. And so I have 2 times the absolute value of x minus 8 equals 6. Then I need to get rid of this multiplication of times being by 2. I didn't word that very well, sorry. So I'm going to divide by 2 to get rid of it. That becomes 1. So I have the absolute value of x minus 8 equals 3. Now that I have the absolute value by itself, now I can set up my two equations, because either x minus 8 equals 3 or x minus 8 equals negative 3. And then I'll solve each equation. So I have x equals 11, or if I solve it this way, I get x equals 5. So I have two answers. We always need to set up two equations for these, but we can only set up two equations once I have the absolute value part by itself.